How's it going, guys? We are finally back with another video, and we're going to talk baseball again. It's been a while since the actual end of the baseball season. I've been writing this script and just had some life stuff coming up, and unfortunately didn't get this out as quickly as I wanted to, but we've now finally have the time, and with the newest season being in the books, we have an update to my lifetime power rankings. So I thought I'd take the time and go over what's changed. I'll post up a link here, either here, I'm not quite sure, to my original Power Rankings video so you can have more understanding of the history of each franchise during my lifetime. So this video is going to focus more on kind of just the changes from the end of last year to this year and focus more on how teams performed during this most recent season. So try to make this a little bit shorter, easier to digest for you all, but let's go ahead and get started. So the first one we have up, we have the Colorado Rockies now are the worst franchise of my lifetime, moving back a spot from number 29. The Rockies finished with only 59 wins this year, which is their second lowest win total of their franchise history and lowest since their second year as a franchise. They were eliminated from the playoffs with 21 games still left to play and finished last in the NL West. The Pittsburgh Pirates also moved back one spot after finishing with a record of 76 and 86. Unlike the Rockies, the Pirates finished with their best record since 2016. The Pirates did show some promise coming out of the gate with a 20 and 9 record and at the end of April, but didn't have another month of winning baseball until September. Moving up from the MLB basement are the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles exceeded everyone's expectations by 24 and a half games more than their preseason betting line and took the highly contested AL East. They did it mainly on unknown players and exceeded 100 wins for the first time in my lifetime. This season should still be considered a success, even though they were swept out of the playoffs by the eventual champions. But now we'll have to see if this season was a one hit wonder or if they'll be able to sustain some consistent success. Kansas City stays in the 27th spot after finishing with the second worst record in the league and tied for the franchise's worst win total, not just in my lifetime, but in history. They were eliminated from playoff contention before we even got to September, and naturally, the manager took the fall for it and has been ousted after just 3 seasons. The Mariners took a step backward in the rankings as well as from their wild card appearance last year. The Mariners only lost 2 games more than they did last year, but that was just enough to keep them out of the playoffs this year. It looked like the Mariners were going to have a similar end of season blitz when they went 21 and 6 in August and vaulted all the way to third in the American League. However, a 12 and 17 September bit them in the end and were eliminated on game number 161. Dropping to number 25 and barely staying ahead of the Mariners are the Detroit Tigers. The Tigers actually outperformed expectations by winning 12 games more than last year and taking second in the AL Central. But that still wasn't enough to get Miggy Cabrera into the playoffs one final time as they still finished below 500 and 11 games out of the wild card. The Milwaukee Brewers vaulted 2 spots after taking home the NL Central title and making the playoffs 5 of the last 6 years. Being the worst placed division winner meant having to play in the wild card round where they were ousted by the eventual NL champ Diamondbacks. The Brewers have not won a playoff series since 2018. The next 5 teams held firm from last year's rankings, so let's start off with the San Diego Padres, who we thought would all build the momentum off of last year's NLCS run. However, the Padres never really got going and hovered around 500 for most of the season. They tried to make a last ditch effort to make the playoffs by going on a tear in September. The Padres won 14 of their final 16 games, but ultimately fell short of making the playoffs. If you thought the Padres were a disappointing team, the Mets could not turn all of their money and star power into even just a playoff team. Not even Scherzer and Verlander could help this franchise get past the other 3 playoff teams from the NL East, and both were gone to contenders before the trade deadline. The Miami Marlins made the playoffs this year for just the fourth time in franchise history and won the tiebreaker over the Diamondbacks for the fifth seed in the National League. They were helped by a 19-8 June and limped into the playoffs just to be housed by the Phillies. They've now dropped their World Series percentage to 50% when they make the playoffs. If you can believe it, at 71-91, the Washington Nationals were actually the third best team in terms of outperforming their preseason betting expectations. That should tell you how depleted and bad this roster is. The season started out rough, like everyone would expect, but it surprisingly had a very effective August, going 17-11. It still wasn't enough to get them out of the basement, though, of the NL East. Moving from the third best team in outperforming expectations to the second best team, and that was the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds were the talk of the town this year when they went on a 12-game winning streak early in the season, and rookie Ellie De La Cruz bringing the high energy. The Reds would eventually falter down the stretch and found themselves 2 games out of the NL wildcard. The most disappointing team of 2023 tumbled 3 spots down to number 18, and that was the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox could not improve on the 81-81 record last year and ended up firing their general manager and executive vice president. The Sox stumbled right out of the gate, going 8-20 during April and ended up 22 and a half games under their preseason betting line. Moving from one Chicago team to the next are the Cubs. The Cubs slid 1 spot, but more so because 2 teams previously behind them had stellar seasons, including the champion Rangers. The Cubs actually finished better than their preseason line and spent most of the season in playoff contention. What did them in was a 12-17 September and choking away 5 of their last 6 games to end up 1 game outside of the wild card. The Tampa Bay Rays moves up 2 spots to number 16 after improving upon last year's record and winning 99 games this year. Good enough for second in the American League. They tied the modern era record winning games to start the season when they started 13-0. The Rays continued to ride their good record into the postseason, but were stopped immediately by the Rangers and were ousted in 2 games. The Angels slide back 1 spot after the same old story of not being able to piece together a roster with 2 all-star players. The Angels looked for a second like they were finally going to make it to the postseason, even acquiring some additional help before the trade deadline. Disaster struck shortly after, and Shohei Ohtani was then put out for the rest of the season. And before yesterday or 2 days ago, the biggest question was whether or not he would actually choose to go and stick around. But we just got that answer here recently that he'll be moving on. And so we'll have to see if the Angels just tumble even down and maybe even lose Trout after this. The league's worst team this year has slid back 3 spots down to number 14. The Oakland Athletics, soon to be Las Vegas Athletics, are a mess, and it seems like they don't really care that they are a mess. Which to me is a little odd because 2028, which is the year that they project the new stadium in Vegas to be finished, is still a really long time away. What are they going to do after their lease ends in 2024? Are they going to stick around and have no fans for 3 more years in the Bay Area? Do they really want to go to Vegas in 2025 and stink up the joint there? That's not going to get the fans super excited about your team. I feel a little bad, at least for the fans and players, but that sympathy doesn't quite transfer over to the ownership or city of Oakland. The NL champ Arizona Diamondbacks surprisingly stay put at number 13 despite making it all the way to the World Series. They did gain some pretty significant ground on the next couple of teams at least, but it's crazy to think that just 2 years ago this was only a 54-win team. The Diamondbacks were the 6th seed in the NL and stumbled into the playoffs on a 4-game losing streak. However, they started the postseason strong, sweeping both the Brewers and their division rival Dodgers. A dramatic 7-game series with the Phillies where the D-backs had to go on the road to win games 6 and 7, and it got this team into the World Series for just the second time in franchise history. They may have used everything they had on the Phillies though and just quite didn't have enough to overcome the Rangers. I feel bad saying this, but there's just not much to be said about the Minnesota Twins. The only reason that they held on to the number 12 spot ahead of Arizona was the fact that they were able to take advantage of a poor division where they were the only team with a winning record. The Twins finished the season about where they were projected and got to host the Blue Jays in their first round of the postseason. Their Game 1 victory was the first playoff win since 2004 and their first series win since 2002. Speaking of the Blue Jays, they've fallen out of the top 10 to number 11. The Blue Jays have started to become a pretty consistent 90-win team, and it was enough to get them in as the final AL wildcard. They beat out the Mariners by just one game and then fell to the Twins in the very first round. The biggest riser of the rankings is undoubtedly the World Series champs. The Texas Rangers rose from number 17 all the way to number 10 in my lifetime power rankings. I honestly want to say that other than the Golden Knights, per the expansion rule, this is the team that has risen the most out of any of my rankings after winning a title in probably the past 10 years. The Rangers were in a battle with the Astros at the entire season for the AL West crown. In fact, both ended with the same record, and by virtue of the tiebreaker, the Astros retained the division crown. However, the Rangers would get the last laugh in a dramatic 7 game series where the visiting team won every single game. The Rangers took home their first World Series title in franchise history and did it by becoming the only team to win by going unbeaten on the road. The rest of my rankings are kind of boring because there wasn't any movement amongst the top 9. Phillies tried to make back-to-back trips to the World Series. After Game 5 of the NLCS and going back to Philly, it seemed like this team was destined for a title. The Diamondbacks had different plans, and after eliminating their division rival Braves, they were watching the World Series from the couch. The Guardians ended up taking a step back this year after taking the AL Central crown last year. They finished with their worst win total since 2012, not quite the way to send off manager Terry Francona. Cleveland has been so close so many times recently, but now it looks like they might be headed in the wrong direction. A little bit of deja vu for the Giants, who had another promising start to their season, tarnished by pooping the bed in the second half of the season. The Giants finished the last third of the season 18-34 to end the season with a losing record. Maybe Bruce Bochy wasn't the problem. The Houston Astros just continue to post up big numbers and make deep playoff runs. This year marked the 7th straight ALCS appearance and came just one game away from returning to the World Series. Just like their NL counterpart Philly, they couldn't quite complete the dramatic 7 game series to return to the World Series. If they would have at least made it to the World Series, they'd only be 1 point behind the Los Angeles Dodgers, who like early playoff exits and chewing bubblegum, and they're all out of gum. All joking aside, the Dodgers had another stellar regular season, taking home their 10th division title in 11 years and 4th straight 100-plus win season, if you don't count the COVID year. Throughout the season, it just seemed like you could tell there was something a little off with this team and didn't make them serious title contenders, but I don't think anyone still expected them to go out against the Diamondbacks. One of those things that was a little bit, I would say, wrong with them tended to be their starting pitching, and it looks like they may have solved that if Shohei Ohtani can actually pitch. Not super happy about Ohtani choosing to go to the Dodgers. The rich just seem to get richer, but we'll see if that huge contract actually projects into titles for this Dodgers team. While I'm not saying Pujols and Yadier Molina were the sole reason St. Louis won the division last year, it is quite surprising to see the Cardinals drop so fast after their departures. Are we finally at a rebuilding phase for this squad? It's hard to dog on them when they've been so good, but this year did bring out a lot of worsts, including this is the first time since 2007 that they had a losing record, and the first time since the very first season of me being alive that the Cardinals finished at the bottom of the division standings. The Boston Red Sox finished closest to their preseason betting line than any other team. That doesn't really say much considering their expectation was to miss the playoffs. They possibly could have had a chance to make the postseason, only out of the playoffs by 4 games to start September. However, they closed the season 9-19 and finished with a losing record. The Atlanta Braves finished the regular season again at the top of the NL East, but are we starting to see shades of the 90s Braves coming out where they're failing to produce in the playoffs? everyone would be way more up in arms if they didn't win that title in 2021. The early ouster by the Phillies is also what's having everyone going crazy about whether the playoff format is actually a disadvantage to the higher seeds. And if you remember in my original MLB Power Rankings video, I discussed about how dominant and consistent the Yankees have been during my lifetime. Well, I must have jinxed them because their 82-80 record this year was the worst record since 1992. With that said, the Yankees still hold the longest active winning season streak across all major sports at 31. It took them the second to last game of the season to get there, but they still did it. The Yankees still would need the Braves to win the World Series a couple of more times to be supplanted as the greatest MLB dynasty of my lifetime. And there you have it. Those are my rankings. I know I blasted right through them, but I just wanted to give you a shorter video. I promised I've been wanting to do those for a longer time. Thank you again for so much for the support, and I promise the content is going to continue to get out there a little bit more. In reality, I had a few Catan videos posted up and ready to go, but for some reason my files got corrupted, and I went on a 4-game winning streak during those times, and not having those videos just kind of really shook my my motivation there for a second. But now that we have this baseball video coming out, I also want to do a video on how much I have come to hate college football. So stay tuned for that one. If you're here for the sports content, stay tuned for the Catan content because I will be busting that out too. I'm gonna hopefully get a couple of videos out before the Christmas holiday, but for Christmas and New Year's, I will probably uh, not be posting anything. So I'll try to get you a little bit more content out before then to hopefully last through the rest of the year. Hope you all had a great time. Thanks again. Let me know what you think of these rankings. If you like the video, please help support me by liking and commenting. That support just really helps me just motivationally as well as getting more views. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.